In the
We miss you
quiet
so much,
coastal
sweetheart.
town of Harbor
Are you
Crest,
staying safe
an
out there?
elderly mother
I
walked
am,
into a
Mom. Don't you
mall
worry
with
about
nothing
me.
but a
I love
puppy at
you.
her side, never knowing she was stepping into the jaws of
Get
humiliation.
back now!
When a
Stay away from
billionaire's
them!
son soaked her in ice-cold soda and mocked her pain, the world looked away. But miles
Oh,
away,
look,
her
I
phone
ruined your little
connected to the one
dress.
man she trusted most, her son, a hardened Navy warrior forged in fire and loss. And in that moment, destiny shifted. Because when a mother cries, even heaven listens. And sometimes heaven sends a soldier. If you believe honor still matters, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart and restore faith in humanity. A pale gold morning drifted across Harbor Crest like a whispered blessing. The small coastal town, with its tidy rows of cedar-shingled cottages and distant hum of gulls circling above the foamy shoreline, always woke slowly, as though savoring each breath of salt-coated air before surrendering itself to another day. The breeze carried a soft warmth that promised calm, but beneath that serene veil lived the stories of lives tempered by storms, stories of mothers who waited, sons who fought, and dogs who understood loyalty before they understood the world. Mrs. Lydia Rowan stepped onto the brick-lined sidewalk with her usual measured stride, clutching a worn leather leash that connected her to a 4-month-old German shepherd named Valor. At first glance, Lydia appeared the embodiment of every gentle memory a small town cherished. A retired elementary school teacher in her early 70s, her silver hair pulled into a low, soft bun, her narrow shoulders wrapped in a faded cream cardigan, and her warm, almond-shaped eyes brimming with a lifetime of calm endurance. Her steps carried traces of both age and determination, for she had spent 4 decades guiding children toward goodness, and though her bones now ached, her spirit had only grown steadier. Beside her, young Valor trotted with the disciplined bounce of a pup trained to understand order far earlier than most. His fur was a rich blend of charcoal black and warm sable, his ears standing too large for his head, yet giving him an alert, earnest look. His deep amber eyes scanned every corner of the street with a vigilance that came from his bloodline and the first months of specialized K-9 conditioning. He wore a simple collar embroidered with his name, though the muscle forming under his thick coat hinted at the powerful working dog he would soon become. At only 4 months, he already demonstrated the traits demanded of Navy K-9 units: controlled focus, instinctive loyalty, and a surprising emotional awareness that allowed him to sense Lydia's moods before she spoke. Lydia reached down to pat the top of his head. "Easy there, sweetheart," she murmured, as Valor slowed his pace to match hers. His tail gave a disciplined wag, not wild, but respectful, as though he understood the fragility of the small hand guiding him. In truth, there was something almost sacred in the way he stayed close to her. He had been entrusted to her care by her son, Elias Rowan, only weeks before. That single gesture had brought a quiet joy back into Lydia's days, but it had also carved a small space inside her heart where longing echoed restlessly. Elias Rowan. The very thought of him tightened her chest with pride and fear in equal measure. Her son, now 34, had grown into the kind of man forged by hardship and kept upright by discipline. He had inherited her soft eyes, but not her softness. Instead, life had sculpted him into a figure of unyielding angles and silent strength. He stood, nearly 6'3", his shoulders broad and battle-hardened from years of carrying equipment heavier than most men could lift. His hair, short, dark, and regulation tidy, framed a face defined by sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and a scar that ran discreetly along his right temple, a thin, pale reminder of a mission gone wrong in the sands of the Middle East. His skin was a deep sun bronze from harsh climates, and his posture always carried the unmistakable precision of someone who never forgot he was a soldier, even off duty. Elias was admired for his discipline, feared for his precision, and quietly respected for the way he treated every civilian with gentleness, as though he believed kindness required as much strength as battle. Yet, beneath that composed exterior lay a man shaped by loss. A teammate he had trained with for years had died beside him during a desert assault, and though he rarely spoke of it, the silent gravity in his gaze revealed that moment had never fully loosened its grip. His mother knew. Valor sensed it. And this homecoming, this attempt of hers to find him a meaningful gift, felt like a small step toward reminding her son that he was still tethered to a world of warmth rather than only conflict. As the town slowly came to life, Lydia made her way toward Harbor Crest Galleria, the largest and most modern shopping center in the region. It stood at the heart of the town like a proud monument of glass and steel, gleaming against the rustic charm of the surrounding streets. Lydia seldom visited malls. She preferred quiet bookstores and local markets, but today demanded something special, something grand, a symbol of gratitude for her son's safe return. "We'll find him something he can carry with him," she whispered to Valor, who looked up with a soft bark, as if promising to help. Inside the Galleria, the air shifted from salty warmth to a crisp, conditioned coolness. The polished marble floors reflected the soft glow of overhead lights, and the aisles were filled with the muted chatter of early shoppers. Lydia adjusted her grip on Valor's leash. Some people smiled as they passed, mostly older couples who recognized her from years ago, but others cast wary looks at the dog. She didn't fault them. They didn't know he had been trained to obey commands most adults would struggle to remember under pressure. Near the center of the mall, an elegant watch boutique, Halden & Comer timepieces, displayed its treasures behind its velvet-draped entrance. Lydia paused to gaze through the glass at the rows of handcrafted watches. She imagined one of them on Elias's wrist, something durable yet dignified, something that spoke to the man he had become. But just as she took a step forward, a sharp burst of laughter shattered the calm. "Look what we've got here," a mocking voice drawled. "A dog walking a grandma, or a grandma walking a dog? Hard to tell which one's in charge." Lydia turned calmly. A group of 4 young men stood near the seating area, dressed in high-priced designer clothing that clashed with their smug expressions. The one who had spoken stepped forward. Brent Halden, the 26-year-old son of Adrian Halden, the shipping magnate whose wealth dominated Harbor Crest's marina. Brent was tall but not imposing. His posture suggested entitlement rather than strength. His sandy blonde hair was styled with deliberate carelessness, and his gray eyes were sharp with the kind of arrogance born from never facing consequences. He wore a navy cashmere jacket, perfectly fitted trousers, and an attitude that suggested the world existed for his entertainment. Behind him loitered his friends, 3 men similarly privileged but less noteworthy, each wearing the lazy grin of someone who found cruelty humorous. Brent folded his arms, smirking as he studied Lydia from head to toe. "This luxury wing is for people who can actually afford what's inside," he said, loud enough for nearby shoppers to hear. "Not for charity cases." Valor instantly stepped closer to Lydia's leg, tail stiff, ears raised. His deep instinct as a protector surged, though he didn't bark, just gave a low, rumbling warning that came naturally to a canine-trained pup. Lydia gently touched his head. "It's all right, sweetheart," she whispered, before looking back at Brent. "I'm just here to shop for my son, that's all." Brent let out another laugh, and his friends joined in like obedient hyenas. "Your son? What's he gonna do with anything in that boutique? Pawn it?" "My son serves in the United States Navy," Lydia replied softly, her voice dignified but trembling ever so slightly. "And he is coming home today." "Oh, a soldier?" Brent's grin widened. "So he's not around. No wonder you got brave enough to show your face here." A flicker of anger tightened Lydia's chest, but she inhaled slowly, reminding herself that people like Brent thrived on cruelty. She had handled far more difficult personalities, children who tested boundaries, families who refused to believe in second chances. But this felt different, sharp, intentionally cruel. When she stepped to the side to walk around the boys, Brent lowered his foot abruptly, blocking her path. "Going somewhere? I think your little rat dog wants to play." Valor growled under his breath, his young muscles taut. He didn't understand malice, only danger. "Move your foot, young man," Lydia said, steady but tired. "I'm not here to cause trouble." Brent leaned closer, smirk twisting. "You already did, Grandma." The mall's ambient chatter faded as nearby shoppers turned to watch. No one intervened. No one spoke. The weight of the silence wrapped around Lydia like an unwelcome shroud, but she stood tall. 4 decades of teaching had taught her how to face challenges without trembling. Brent took a half step forward, and something in his posture shifted. Not yet physical intimidation, but its precursor. Valor barked once, sharp and protective. The sound echoed through the hall. "Oh, so the mutt's got a voice," Brent sneered. "Better keep him quiet before someone mistakes him for a stray." Lydia held Valor closer. Her heart beat faster, not from fear for herself, but fear for the pup entrusted to her. "You will leave us alone now," she said quietly. "Please." Brent chuckled, glancing at his friends. "Or what? Your soldier son will come running?" He exaggerated a mocking salute. "Better hope he shows up quick." Lydia swallowed, steadying her breathing. She wasn't helpless, but she was alone here, and it was only the beginning. Because as Brent's laughter filled the corridor and Valor braced himself protectively in front of her, Lydia felt a sharp, sinking intuition. This morning's calm had been a false promise. Something darker was unraveling, thread by thread. The day Elias was returning home would not begin with warmth, but with a challenge neither mother nor pup deserved. And Lydia, for the first time in years, whispered a silent prayer that her son would reach Harbor Crest before something irreversible happened. The laughter in the luxury wing sharpened as Brent Halden stepped forward, the polished heel of his designer shoe tapping an impatient rhythm against the marble like a conductor preparing for a cruel performance. He lifted his phone, angling the camera toward Lydia and the young German shepherd by her feet. The overhead lights caught the slick metallic finish of the device, making it gleam like something predatory. "All right, boys," Brent said with a theatrical flourish. "It's time for today's entertainment. Let's make the Harbor Crest feed proud." His voice echoed confidently through the wide corridor, born from a lifetime of being told yes and never being told enough. Lydia felt Valor's small shoulder brush against her calf, the pup's instincts rising like a tide. She kept her hand on his head, her fingers trembling slightly. The tremor wasn't caused by Brent. It was something deeper. The realization that cruelty had changed its mask over the decades, but never its intent. She had faced children acting out, parents projecting frustrations, even grief-stricken tempers. But this was deliberate humiliation for sport, and she was unprepared for how sharp it felt. Brent circled her with the casual swagger of someone who had never been challenged. His sandy blonde hair caught the cool mall lighting, his smirk widening as the phone recorded. "Introduce yourself, Grandma," he said mockingly. "Say something heartwarming for the camera, or maybe something inspiring about courage." He lifted Valor's leash with 2 fingers, sneering. "Or maybe about how to raise a mutt," Valor growled, low but controlled, the kind of warning sound that should have made any sensible person step back. But Brent wasn't sensible. He was reckless in the way only the endlessly privileged could be. He waved his hand in front of Valor's face, taunting. "Ah, look, he thinks he's tough." "Please," Lydia said, steady but quiet. "Stop provoking him. He's trained, but he's still very young. This doesn't need to happen." "Oh, it absolutely needs to happen," Brent said, grinning. "See, I'm proving a point. People like you don't belong in luxury spaces. That's what my dad says, and he knows everything about this town." Near the storefront, an employee stepped out from behind the counter. She was a young woman, maybe in her mid-20s, with curly dark hair pulled into a neat braid and soft brown eyes that darted nervously between Brent and Lydia. Her name tag read Renee Martin. She wore the fitted black uniform of Halden & Co. and clutched a stack of freshly polished watch cases. Her posture was small and hesitant, shoulders tucked inward as if she wished she could fold herself away from the scene entirely. "Brent," she said carefully, "maybe you should let her pass. Customers are starting to notice." Brent didn't even look at her. "Relax, Renee. I'm making content. Maybe if this goes viral, I'll even tag the store. That's exposure, right?" His friends laughed, clapping each other on the back. One of them, a lanky brunette with a sharp chin and a permanently curled lip, lifted his own phone to start filming from another angle. Lydia's stomach tightened. She recognized the look of an audience hungry for humiliation. She drew a slow breath through her nose, grounding herself the way she used to teach frightened children to do. "I just want to buy a gift for my son," she said, mostly to remind herself she belonged there. "That's all." Brent's grin twisted wider. "Oh, don't worry. This'll be a gift he never forgets." He reached into the hand of one of his friends and grabbed a tall plastic cup filled with deep crimson soda and ice. Condensation glistened along the sides like tiny droplets of cold intent. Lydia's eyes widened, not out of fear, but from the shock of how fast cruelty escalated. "Brent, don't," Renee said sharply. He didn't listen. With a single flick of his wrist, he tipped the cup and launched its freezing contents downward. The soda exploded across Lydia's head and shoulders, a cascade of ice and red syrup that stung her scalp, soaked through her cardigan, and ran in shivering rivulets down her neck. The cold hit so violently that her breath caught, and for a moment she stood utterly still, not because she accepted the act, but because her mind struggled to comprehend how someone could choose to do such a thing to another human being. Valor yelped as a splash hit his small back, and he scrambled in confusion on the slippery marble. Brent deliberately shifted his weight and nudged the pup with his shoe hard enough to send him sliding across the floor. "Oops," he said, with faux innocence. "Didn't see him there." The sound of Valor's whimper was what broke Lydia. She bent toward him, hands shaking as she tried to steady the frightened pup. The soda dripped from her hair, leaving faint red streaks along her temples like someone had painted cruelty directly onto her skin. The crowd had grown. Several people watched with silent discomfort. One older man shook his head, but stepped back instead of forward. Two teenage girls whispered behind their hands, torn between embarrassment and fascination. No one intervened, not yet. A mall security guard approached, but his steps were hesitant. He was a thick-set man in his late 50s with thinning gray hair, dull blue eyes, and a slight slump in his posture, as if years of conflict avoidance had bent him inward. His name tag identified him as Harold Benton. He cleared his throat. "What's going on here?" Brent clapped a hand on Harold's shoulder like they were old friends. "Just doing your job for you, Harold. This woman's dog is causing a scene. You should really escort her out before something worse happens." Harold looked at Lydia, then at Valor, who trembled against her leg. His expression wavered, sympathy fighting with fear of repercussions. "Ma'am, dogs aren't allowed near this wing unless they're service animals." "He is training to be one," Lydia said, forcing her voice steady. She tried to wipe the soda from her face, but the syrup clung stubbornly to her skin. "Please, I'm not causing trouble. I only want to buy a gift." A taller man emerged from the boutique behind Renee. Gerald Whitcomb, the mall's floor manager, was a man in his 40s with a polished appearance, slick black hair combed back with precision, a thin mustache, and tailored attire that screamed ambition. His chin was perpetually lifted, as if he believed every conversation should be directed upward toward him. "Harold," he barked, "why is this woman still here? She's dripping all over the floor." "Sir, Gerald held up a hand. "Don't explain, just remove her. This is not the clientele our boutique wings cater to." Lydia stared at him, stunned. "I didn't do anything wrong," she whispered. Her chest felt tight, her breathing shallow. The humiliation wasn't just physical. It stabbed at something deeper, a place inside her built by decades of dignity. "You've created a public disturbance," Gerald said curtly. "Look at this mess, and your dog is clearly agitated." "That's because your employee kicked him," Renee muttered under her breath. Gerald shot her a glare sharp enough to silence her instantly. Brent waved his phone triumphantly. "I've got it all on video. Harold, you better act fast before she sues you for emotional distress or something." He laughed, knowing his father's influence insulated him from consequences. Lydia closed her eyes briefly. Her heart hammered painfully in her ribs, not from fear of Brent, but from a sudden desperate need for someone, anyone, to stop this before it went further, before something inside her broke completely. She reached into her small purse with trembling fingers. She didn't plan to argue anymore. She didn't have the strength to fight men who had never learned compassion. Instead, she pulled out her phone and unlocked it with a shaky swipe. Her thumb hovered over Elias's contact, the only number she knew by heart. Just hearing his voice would steady her. She pressed the call icon, but before she could lift the phone to her ear, Brent lunged with startling speed. "Oh, no, you don't," he snarled, smacking her wrist with enough force to knock the phone from her grasp. The device flew in a small arc before crashing onto the marble with a sharp crack, skidding until it hit the base of a decorative planter. Lydia let out a soft gasp, not for herself, but for the connection violently severed, for the lifeline she'd tried to reach. Valor barked, high-pitched and panicked, rushing toward the fallen device only to be blocked by Harold, who stepped in automatically. Brent leaned close, his breath smelling of mint gum and entitlement. "There, no phone, no witnesses, except the ones I choose." His friends hooted with laughter, and Lydia, for the first time in years, felt truly, utterly small. But the call had already connected, and miles away, a Navy sailor had heard everything. The desert wind still clung to Elias Rowan's uniform when the helicopter touched down at Blackwater Naval Air Station, a modest but strategic outpost settled between scrubland hills and the winding coastal highway 2 hours north of Harbor Crest. The blades slowed with a heavy metallic groan, scattering dust across the landing pad in shimmering waves. Elias stepped down from the aircraft with the controlled weight of a man accustomed to the transition between war and home, though he never truly felt at ease in either. He moved like a shadow sculpted from discipline, broad-shouldered, purposeful, his dark hair cut to regulation length, the edges sharp against the bronzed skin hardened by years beneath unforgiving suns. A faint scar cut across the lower edge of his cheekbone, pale against his rugged jaw, a constant reminder of a nighttime ambush in the mountains overseas. It had changed him, made him quieter, more deliberate, but no less formidable. He inhaled the coastal air, expecting peace. What reached him instead was chaos. His phone vibrated once, then again, and then, automatically, the line connected. His mother's device was set to approve his calls instantly, no matter the circumstance. At first he heard only faint shuffling, like fabric dragging against marble. Then a whimper, high-pitched, strained, unmistakably Valor's. Elias's spine locked, his muscles tensed beneath his fatigues, his boots halted mid-step. Then he heard her. His mother's voice, not the calm, warm steadiness he grew up with, but thin, trembling, layered with humiliation she tried desperately to hide. "Please, don't hurt him," she whispered. A man laughed, a sharp, arrogant bark that grated against Elias's nerves like shrapnel. Another cheer followed, and then the unmistakable impact of something being knocked from her hands. Elias didn't blink, didn't breathe. The phone picked up the echo of the mall's atrium, the mockery of strangers, the sliding scrape of a frightened dog on polished floors, and he froze in place, but only for a heartbeat. Then the soldier took over, his eyes sharpened to steel, the softness evaporating from his expression as though it had never belonged there. The exhaustion of deployment, the brutal nights, the scattered firefights, disappeared under the tidal wave of instinctive, primal purpose. His mother was in danger, and he was not there. His stomach tightened with a familiar burn, guilt swift and cutting. He'd felt it before, years ago, when he failed to save one of his team during a collapsed structure rescue. The same helplessness threatened to rise now, but Elias crushed it beneath the iron weight of resolve. He moved. "Lieutenant Rowan!" a voice called sharply. Elias turned sharply and found Captain Rourke, a tall man in his late 50s, approaching with steady strides. Rourke's posture was immaculate, military to the core, his salt and pepper beard, trimmed short along a jawline, still strong despite age. His slate-blue eyes observed everything with unspoken authority. He had long been a mentor to Elias, the father figure who guided him through his darkest deployments. "Son, you just landed. Protocol requires—" "There's no time," Elias said, voice stripped of anything except purpose. "My mother is in danger." Rourke watched the young man's face for one long moment. Then he nodded. "Take one of the tactical SUVs," he ordered. "They're faster, and Rowan, don't arrive angry. Arrive precise." Elias gave a curt nod of gratitude. His boots echoed sharply against the concrete as he sprinted toward the row of vehicles. He threw open the door of a black-armored SUV, tossed his duffel into the passenger seat, and slid behind the wheel. The engine roared to life beneath him, powerful, tuned for pursuit and emergency deployment. The phone was still connected. Valor's cries broke through again. His mother's breath hitched. A man mocked her, every syllable dripping condescension. Elias's grip tightened so hard on the steering wheel that the leather creaked. "I'm coming, Mom," he whispered, for her, for himself, and perhaps as a promise to the version of him who once felt powerless. He tore out of the air station with ruthless speed, the SUV spitting gravel behind him. The road ahead wound around low coastal cliffs and dense pines. He navigated the hairpin curves without hesitation, the tires gripping asphalt like a predator tracking its prey. His mind sharpened into mission focus. He assessed the sounds in the background of the call, a wide space with tiled acoustics, multiple voices, background music faintly recognizable. Then a certain muffled echo confirmed it, the mall's luxury wing, and Harbor Crest only had one mall of that scale. He routed his mental map. Distance, approximately 87 miles. Estimated time, 72 minutes under normal conditions. Unacceptable. He accelerated. The SUV surged forward, engine growling as he pushed it past regulation speeds. Sunlight flickered through pine branches, painting momentary shadows across his face. His jaw clenched. His breath was even, controlled, practiced through years of combat breathing. His mother had always told him his greatest strength was the way he could remain calm even when the world burned around him. Today, he felt that burning in his blood, but he kept the calm. He thumbed the switch under the dashboard. The SUV's emergency mode activated, a small perk of being part of the Navy's Rapid Response Division. For civilian eyes, it was simply a black vehicle. For the road ahead, it was something closer to a storm. Halfway through the highway, he passed a roadside diner where a woman with copper-red hair was packing boxes into a truck. She glanced up just in time to see the SUV blur by. Her brows knitted briefly, concern, curiosity, surprise, but soon she faded behind him. Her name, unknown to Elias, was Dana Summers, a 32-year-old paramedic who had survived a bridge collapse 2 years ago, leaving her with a scar along her collarbone and a deep sense of obligation to help anyone in distress. Her brief appearance on the roadside, though irrelevant now, was another life orbiting near the path of the storm Elias carried toward Harbor Crest. Wind whipped against the SUV as Elias veered onto the coastal highway ramp. Every second mattered. Every syllable he had heard through the phone replayed in a relentless loop. The mockery, the splash of soda, the fear in his mother's breath. And then Valor's cry again. That broke something inside him. Not his composure, but something deeper. A vow reforged under heat. He whispered, "Hang on, buddy," imagining the small pup covered in syrup, scared, confused, doing his best to protect Lydia despite his young age. He pressed harder on the accelerator. Minutes collapsed in on themselves. The world narrowed to a tunnel of asphalt and distant fury. And finally, the city limits appeared, the skyline bright with afternoon sun. Harbor Crest Galleria rose like a gleaming citadel ahead. Elias exhaled once. He had arrived. He didn't waste time hunting for parking. He swerved into the loading zone, braked so hard the SUV rocked on its tires, and jumped out before the engine fully settled. People on the sidewalk turned. His presence, tall, muscular, uniform fitted across powerful shoulders, was impossible to ignore. Sweat darkened the collar of his fatigues, his chest rising evenly with practiced control, though his eyes blazed with contained fire. Every step toward the mall entrance felt like pushing through a storm cloud that only thickened the closer he got. The glass doors parted. The cold air inside hit him first, then the silence. The hallway stretched before him, pristine marble gleaming under high lights, but the crowd told the real story, clustered, uncomfortable, whispering. And then he saw her, his mother, Lydia Rowan. Knees slightly bent, shoulders sagged under the weight of drying soda that stained her cardigan crimson. Her hair stuck to her cheeks, and her glasses sat askew on her nose. Her small hand clutched Valor's leash tight, though the pup pressed close to her leg with trembling loyalty. Something inside Elias cracked, but silently, invisibly. He did not run. He walked with a deliberate pace that made people instinctively step aside. His posture was absolute control. A storm condensed into human form. The luxury wing seemed to shrink as he approached. His boots struck the marble with rhythmic certainty, echoing like distant thunder. Shoppers parted, forming a path for him out of equal parts fear and reverence. No one knew who he was, but everyone recognized the unmistakable aura of purpose. Brent Halden was still laughing, phone raised carelessly. "And look at her face, Preston. This is priceless." He stopped mid-sentence because a shadow fell over him, and when he turned, he saw eyes forged in war, eyes that promised the reckoning he never believed could come. Elias Rowan had arrived, and the world in that marble hallway shifted. Nothing would remain the same. The luxury wing of Harbor Crest Galleria fell into a hush so complete that even the soft jazz filtering from the overhead speakers seemed to choke midway through a note. Elias Rowan's boots struck the marble floor with a steady cadence that felt less like footsteps and more like a countdown. His broad shoulders squared beneath the weight of fatigues, still dusted with desert sand. His jaw locked tight enough to strain the muscle along his temple. Every line of his body called out discipline, spine straight, gaze fixed, breath controlled. He had walked into ambush zones quieter than this hallway, but he had never walked into one where the person at the center of danger was his own mother. Lydia Rowan stood barely 20 feet away. Her cardigan clung to her narrow shoulders, weighed down by sticky soda that had dried into dark crimson streaks. Her silver hair, usually brushed into a soft bun, now clumped against her cheeks. Her skin, thin, pale, and lightly freckled from decades of sunshine, was blotched with cold shock. Even from the distance, Elias could see her trembling. Not from fear. Lydia was stronger than most gave her credit for. No, she trembled because she had endured humiliation meant to break dignity itself. At her feet, young Valor stood defiantly. Soda matted his black and sable coat, droplets clinging to his whiskers, but the pup pushed his small body in front of Lydia as though he were a full-grown K9 prepared to take a bullet. His ears were pinned back, his amber eyes locked on Brent Halden with the kind of instinctive protectiveness that had been bred into him long before he was born. He let out a soft, strained bark, a warning, though weighed down by exhaustion and pain. Brent Halden, oblivious to the shifting pressure of the atmosphere, still held his phone raised lazily. "Look at this, Preston," he snickered. "She looks like a melted candle, and the mutt can barely stand. This is pure gold." The words died in his throat, because Elias stepped into the full brightness of the central lights. Brent's gaze drifted upward, catching the hardened planes of the soldier's face. Elias's eyes, deep-set, flint-colored, and carved by sandstorms and sleepless nights, were fixed on him with a cold so sharp it felt physical. His mouth went dry, his fingers faltered on the phone, but his arrogance tried to stand tall. Can I help you?" Brent scoffed, though his voice pitched upward in a small betrayal. Elias didn't answer him. He walked straight to Lydia. "Mom," he said softly. Lydia's breath caught. Her eyes filled instantly, not from sorrow, but from overwhelming relief. "Elias, honey, Her voice broke, and she could not finish. Elias reached out, gently cupping the back of her head, careful not to tug at her soaked hair. He brushed the sticky droplets from her cheek with a tenderness completely at odds with the explosive strength radiating through his body. "I've got you," he whispered. Valor, seeing his alpha, nuzzled Elias's boot with a soft whimper. Elias bent, sliding a strong arm beneath the dog's chest to steady him. The pup licked his wrist weakly. Elias rose to full height again. Then he turned, his eyes locked on Brent. For a heartbeat, the maul held its breath. Brent attempted a smirk. "So, you must be the famous soldier boy she keeps whining about." He flicked his chin toward Lydia. "Tell your mom to keep her mud under control next time, and tell her she owes me for a new drink." Something sharper than fury flickered through Elias's gaze. He took a slow step forward. Renee Martin, the boutique cashier from earlier, stood near the doorway, clutching a handful of watch cases that rattled in her shaking hands. She was a woman of gentle curves, soft brown eyes, and skin the color of copper kissed by sunlight. She sensed the shift in the air, and her breathing quickened. She had seen angry customers, irate teenagers, even belligerent drunks. But this was the poised, razor-thin calm of a man capable of ending a life in silence. Harold Benton, the aging mall security guard, approached with the timidity of a man who wished he could dissolve. Harold had a rounded belly, thinning gray hair, and creases on his forehead that told stories of decades spent compromising for the sake of a paycheck. He swallowed hard as he saw the tension arc between Brent and the imposing stranger. Gerald Whitcomb, the manager, stepped out from the boutique. His polished shoes gleamed. His thin mustache twitched. His eyes assessed Elias with annoyance until they caught the American flag patch on his shoulder. Then, unexpectedly, Gerald's posture stiffened, but not from respect, from fear of liability. "Sir," Gerald said sharply, "whatever is happening here, please remove your dog and your—" Elias ignored him completely. Instead, he reached up with deliberate precision and unzipped the front of his jacket. The movement alone made half the onlookers flinch. Beneath the jacket gleamed a crisp navy uniform shirt. The gold trident pinned to his chest caught the light, a symbol of naval special warfare, an emblem earned only by surviving some of the hardest training in the world. Beneath it were ribbons, a Navy and Marine Corps medal, a combat action ribbon, a Joint Service Achievement Medal, and several deployment stripes. The air shifted. Whispers rippled. "Oh my God, he's a SEAL. Brent messed with a SEAL? I knew something felt off. Look at his posture." Brent's friends stepped backward instinctively. Even Preston lowered his phone an inch, gulping audibly. Elias's stare hardened. When he spoke, he didn't raise his voice, didn't puff his chest, didn't posture like a man trying to intimidate. He spoke simply, directly, his tone controlled by training, not emotion. "Let go of my mother," he said, a command, not a request. Brent's eyes flickered to his friends, searching for support. He saw none. This lady," Brent stammered. Elias stepped closer. Only a foot separated them now. The soldier's towering form eclipsed Brent's expensive jacket and sculpted haircut with ease. Brent could see the scars along Elias's knuckles. He could smell the faint scent of sand and aviation fuel clinging to his uniform. Last chance, Elias murmured. Let go. Brent swallowed. His throat bobbed visibly. He tried to backpedal, but panic and pride collided in a disastrous attempt to save face. You think you can intimidate me? Brent snapped, voice shrill. My father owns half this mall. You're just... Elias moved. It was not a punch, not a shove. It was a disciplined, controlled maneuver, a seamless execution of close-quarters combat technique. He caught Brent's wrist with one hand, twisted, pivoted his weight, and in less than 3 seconds, Brent's arm was pinned behind his back, his face pressed against the marble pillar behind him. Brent shrieked, Ow! Ow! Let go! You're hurting me! Elias didn't increase pressure. He just held firm. You assaulted a senior citizen, he said evenly. You kicked a trained K-9. You humiliated a woman who taught half this town's children how to read. He leaned in slightly, not threatening, just true. You're lucky I got here before someone else decided to intervene. Harold Benton reached them at last. Sir, please, let me handle... Elias glanced at him. Are the cameras working? Harold blinked. Yes, the entire wing, multiple angles. Good, Elias said. At that exact moment, the mall's main entrance doors swung open, and 4 local police officers entered. Their footsteps echoed with calculated authority. Leading them was Officer Miriam Hale, a woman in her early 40s with dark mahogany skin, tightly braided black hair, and an expression that could slice through lies like a blade. She was tall, nearly 6 feet, with sharp shoulders and a posture that demanded respect. Her voice when she spoke carried both discipline and empathy. What's going on here? She called. Harold pointed at Brent, still pinned. He assaulted the woman, ma'am. Cameras caught everything. Officer Hale approached, eyes scanning quickly. When she saw Lydia, soaked, shaking, sticky, her nostrils flared with instant protective anger. Ma'am, she said softly, we'll take care of this. Elias released Brent with a precise motion, stepping back as 2 officers seized the younger man. Brent flailed weakly. You can't arrest me. My dad will... Hale cut him off. Your father cannot save you from felony assault on a senior citizen. She snapped cuffs onto his wrists. Nor from harming a service animal. Brent's knees weakened. Service animal? Elias met his gaze. In training. Gerald Whitcomb surged forward, voice panicked. Officer Hale, surely there's some misunderstanding. Our boutique strives to maintain order. Before he finished the sentence, Hale turned on him. Gerald Whitcomb, multiple witnesses say you ignored and enabled the harassment, and the footage shows you threatening the victim. Her voice lowered. Your job is done. Gerald's face drained to ash gray. Renee Martin inhaled sharply, relief washing over her features. Shoppers clapped softly, then louder, building into a round of applause that echoed across the marble. Not jubilant applause, but grateful, respectful, something long overdue. Lydia covered her mouth with her hand. Tears slipped down her cheek. Valor leaned against her leg, tail thumping weakly. Elias stepped beside her. Are you hurt? He whispered. She shook her head. Not now. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders with careful strength. Let's go home. The law had done its part. Justice, at last, had shape. And it looked like a son who would cross deserts, oceans, and entire towns to protect the woman who raised him. The sun was already dipping behind the rolling dunes west of Harbor Crest by the time Elias guided his mother toward the SUV. The golden rays stretched across the parking lot, catching the sticky remnants of dried soda on Lydia's cardigan. The crimson stains that had once felt humiliating now seemed to glimmer like battle scars, evidence of a moment she survived because her son had arrived in time. Elias opened the passenger door with gentle hands, brushing aside a few stray sand grains that clung to the seat from his deployment gear. Then he helped Lydia climb inside. Valor, rejuvenated enough after the adrenaline of the confrontation, scrambled in after her, pressing his small, sticky frame against her hip. Lydia stroked his head, her fingers tangling in his fur with renewed steadiness. Elias rounded the vehicle and sat behind the wheel. His shoulders, broad and hardened by years of service, loosened for the first time all day. He looked at the mall through the windshield, the gleaming glass, the towering entrance, the crowd beginning to disperse. His mother's voice, still fragile but warming, broke the silence. "You came so fast," she whispered. "I didn't even have time to speak." "You didn't need to," Elias replied quietly. "I heard everything." Lydia placed her hand gently on his arm. Her eyes, soft, aged, but still carrying the quiet authority of someone who had shaped generations, searched his face. "I'm all right now, truly." Elias inhaled slowly, letting the tension bleed from his chest. When he pulled onto the highway, neither of them spoke for several minutes. The hum of the engine and the rhythmic panting of valor filled the vehicle. Lydia watched the landscape roll by, the marsh grasses swaying, the long shadows stretching, the ocean flickering with the last remnants of light. Harbor Crest had always been home, but tonight it felt deeper, like a balm over old wounds both mother and son kept hidden for too long. At the cottage, Elias carried Lydia's purse, the collar of his uniform still faintly smelling of desert wind and aviation fuel. The house, painted soft blue with white window frames, sat beneath two towering oak trees whose branches knitted together like protective arms. The front porch light buzzed on automatically, illuminating a space filled with potted jasmine, old rocking chairs, and the ghost of every story they had lived before war pulled Elias away. Inside, the air smelled of lavender oil and old books. Lydia inhaled deeply, resetting the rhythm of her heart. Elias knelt to unclip Valor's leash, and the young shepherd padded into the living room, circling twice on the rug before flopping down with a dramatic groan. His tail gave a lazy wag. "He's all right," Elias murmured, leaning close to examine Valor's paws. "Just shaken." "As am I," Lydia admitted, but her voice held warmth rather than pain. "But it's different now." Elias straightened. For the first time in months, maybe years, he allowed himself to sit on the sofa beside his mother. The weight he carried, the sorrow carved silently into him by battlefield ghosts, loosened enough for his breath to expand in his chest. Lydia reached out and gently smoothed the tousled hair above his brow. "You're home," she whispered, 3 words that had carried her through every sleepless night of deployment. Elias closed his eyes. "I'm home." The next morning brought soft sunlight and the distant cry of seagulls. Elias woke before dawn, from habit, not nightmare, and stepped outside into the crisp air. The garden awaited him. It was a sprawling collection of hydrangeas, wild roses, overgrown vines, and leaning fences. A sanctuary Lydia had tended alone for 2 years, while her son navigated conflict zones thousands of miles away. He slipped into old work trousers and a faded cotton shirt that clung to the chiseled lines of his torso. With gloves on, he began pulling weeds, trimming edges, rebalancing the warped fence. The repetitive labor grounded him. Every snip of the pruning shears felt like trimming away a memory he no longer needed to carry. Every shovelful of fresh soil was an inhale of new purpose. His scars stretched but did not ache. His mind, so often wired for danger, softened. Valor bounded outside, free of the soda that had clung to him the day before. He chased butterflies between rose bushes, his ears flopping in uneven rhythm. Every time Elias bent to adjust a trellis or replant a wilted lily, Valor nudged his elbow with his snout as if volunteering assistance. "You're not helping," Elias said with a laugh, one Lydia hadn't heard in months. The note of it floated through the open kitchen window. Later that day, Elias took Valor to the local veterinary clinic. The clinic was run by Dr. Myra Collins, a tall, slender woman in her late 40s with warm brown skin, short silver-streaked curls, and eyes that radiated calm competence. Years of treating frightened animals had given her a steady presence and a gentleness that could steady even the most anxious heart. She had once worked in remote wildlife rescue missions after surviving a near-fatal helicopter crash in the Amazon, a moment that taught her the fragility of life and the importance of protecting it. Myra completed her examination of Valor with a small smile. "No fractures, no internal bruising. He's perfectly healthy, just startled and sticky. Quite brave, too." She handed Elias a complimentary treat. "And quite attached to you already." Elias stroked the pup's head. "He saved my mother yesterday." Myra raised an eyebrow. "Then that makes him extraordinary. But so are you, Commander Rowan." Elias shook his head humbly, but her remark settled something warm in his chest. Days passed. Elias rebuilt Lydia's fence, repaired loose shingles, restored the garden to its former grace. He fixed the squeaking back door hinge, tightened the old banister along the stairs, re-oiled the kitchen cabinets, and rewired a malfunctioning porch lamp. These were simple tasks, but they steadied him more than any debriefing ever could. At night, he sat with Lydia on the porch swing, Valor curled at their feet, while they listened to the cicadas. Lydia healed too, not physically, though the cold shock had passed, but emotionally. She no longer saw soda stains when she looked in the mirror. She saw survival. She saw a future she could still fill with warmth. 1 week later, news arrived. Brent Halden stood in the county courthouse, shoulders slumped, eyes hollowed. The judge, a stern woman with iron-gray hair and a gaze that seemed to pierce pretense, declared him guilty of assault on a senior citizen and animal cruelty. His father's influence had not erased the evidence, not after Officer Hale submitted footage from multiple angles. Lydia exhaled a long breath she felt she had been holding all week. Justice had been handed out, not revenge, but accountability. The next day, Harbor Crest Galleria sent a small, velvet-lined box addressed to Valor Rowan. When Lydia opened it, she found a handcrafted leather collar dyed deep navy blue. A polished silver emblem, shaped like a miniature Navy SEAL trident, was affixed to the front. Attached was a note for the little hero who stood his ground when others did not. Lydia fastened the collar around Valor's neck. The puppy puffed his chest proudly, and Elias laughed, ruffling his ears. "You're official now, buddy." On Elias's final day before reporting back for temporary debrief at the naval station, the sky lit with the warmest hues Harbor Crest had seen in weeks. Soft oranges bled into pink, while streaks of lavender cloud stretched lazily above the horizon. Lydia stepped out of her bedroom wearing a dress Elias had surprised her with, a teal, gently pleated fabric that brought out the depth of her gray eyes and made her look 20 years younger. Her silver hair was brushed neatly, framing her face with dignified softness. Elias emerged moments later in his crisp navy dress whites. The uniform sculpted his muscular frame, the fabric sharp against his tanned skin. His metals shimmered faintly in the sunset glow, catching the last traces of light before dusk. Lydia's breath hitched, not out of sadness, but pride. "You look like your father," she whispered, voice trembling. Elias placed his hand over hers. "And you," he said softly, "look like the strength that raised him." They walked to the beach. Valor trotted ahead, ears perked, tail held high, as though he were leading a ceremonial procession. The ocean breeze tousled Elias's short, dark hair. Lydia's dress fluttered at her ankles. They walked slowly, savoring the crunch of sand beneath their feet. The sky deepened to molten gold along the water's edge, turning each wave into liquid fire. People along the boardwalk paused respectfully, recognizing the uniform, the courage, the dignity of the woman beside him. Some nodded, some spoke soft thanks. Elias responded with humility each time, but his attention remained on his mother. Lydia stopped as they reached a weathered wooden bench overlooking the horizon. She squeezed Elias's hand. "You know, the world can be harsh," she said softly, "but love is the one force that survives everything." Elias felt those words settle deep into the place that had been fractured by war and responsibility. "You kept me grounded," he murmured, "even when the world didn't make sense." "And you kept me safe," she replied. Valor barked once, joyful, bounding in circles around them as though trying to lasso the fading sunlight. As the sun dipped completely beyond the water, Elias wrapped an arm around Lydia's shoulders. She leaned into him. Together, with Valor racing ahead, they walked the shoreline, mother, son, and the small, brave guardian who had reminded them both that courage came in many sizes. No matter how dangerous the world became, love was the anchor that held a soldier steady. And in that moment, beneath the painted sky of Harbor Crest, they felt whole again. In the quiet glow of that Harbor Crest sunset, one truth rose brighter than the fading light. Miracles do not always arrive with thunder or angels or heavenly trumpets. Sometimes they come as a son returning home just in time. Sometimes they come as a small dog standing bravely against cruelty. And sometimes they come as the simple, unbreakable love that binds a family together through every storm. Life will never stop testing us. There will always be moments when the world feels cold, when injustice stings, when loneliness creeps in like a long shadow. But even in those moments, miracles still move quietly among us, hidden in kindness, born in courage, breathed into existence by the people who refuse to give up on each other. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who may need a reminder that hope is real. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your words might be the light someone else is searching for. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so these stories of love, honor, and resilience can continue to reach those who need them most. May God bless you and your family with peace, protection, and strength. May He guide your steps through every difficult day, and may His grace surround you like a shield. And if you believe that love, faith, and the courage to stand up for one another are the true miracles of this world,